I'm John Batchelor. Larry Kudlow, my colleague and co-host and friend, CNBC, Kudlow Radio on the weekend. Steve Moore, the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, looking at the results, the debrief of the midterm election 2014, also on Veterans Day, mentioning prominently those who are still with us and those who have left us who've served the United States. Steve Moore mentions his father at 93. I mentioned Irv Kudlow at 92. You two are going to live a long time with this supply side story. You can slow down a little bit. So, Irv Kudlow, and Steve, what's your father's name?
William Moore.
William Moore. And now we discuss the success of this election for President. We talked about President supply side. Now we turn to President Keystone XL pipeline. What happens next, Steve? Does that get done right away with Mr. McConnell?
Yeah, it does. I think that this is one the Democrats understand they should have gotten this done 2 years ago and taken it off the table. I mean, it's an infrastructure project that is very vital. It's going to create 10,000 high-paying jobs, mostly union jobs, John. It'll help with our American independence quest and energy. There's no argument against it, and I think it gets done very soon.
I think you add to that in the same bill is what I'm hearing, Steve. Open up the federal lands.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
And also take off the restrictions for exports.
Exports, right.
Because the export thing is actually holding up production right now, and we could be making some really good money. So, Steve, can we get corporate tax reform second? Is that possible? Paul Ryan believes it is. I talked to Senator Portman over the weekend. He believes it is, but also they want to vote to repeal Obamacare. So what do you think the order is going to be?
Well, let me just go quickly back to what you just said about drilling on federal lands, because all of the oil and gas development that's gone on in the last 6 years has been on private lands, John. And if you open up those federal lands, not only do you dramatically increase our oil and gas output and reduce the price of gasoline at the pump, but Larry, you could generate tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars of revenues for the federal government. So it's a cash cow for everyone. It's a total win-win. Now,
and by the way, when Obama talks about infrastructure, I just want to add this.
Yeah.
Keystone is infrastructure.
It is, yes.
We need pipelines
all over
the country.
Yep.
Because first of all, they're safer than trucks and they're safer than railroads. But we've got to get them to the East Coast refineries, Steve, to get gasoline prices down. Obama never talks about the need to have more pipelines.
We need it. We need a policy of pipeline development in this country, like Eisenhower in the 1950s built the national highway system. And the interesting thing about this infrastructure you and I are talking about, Larry, it doesn't require a dime of federal money. It'll all be done with private dollars. Now, your point about corporate tax reform, yes, Larry, I think this actually could get done. I think that Obama could cut a deal with the Republicans. Why not a deal where you cut maybe the corporate tax rate to 20-25% and let the liberals change the rules on these corporate inversions? I don't have a big problem with that, to make it harder for these inversions to happen, to keep American jobs here. If you do that in combination with the corporate tax reform, you bring jobs back to America. That's what we want.
Gentlemen, I want to be fair to our brethren to the north, because Mr. Harper is impatient and dubious about Mr. Obama and Keystone XL pipeline, and recently proposed is Energy East, which is a pipeline using a natural gas pipeline for some of it, but also building to the St. Lawrence Seaway all the way to the Maritimes to get that Alberta oil sands to market, perhaps even to ship it around to the Gulf of Mexico, because Mr. Obama has hesitated, has stalled these many years. I mention that because we don't have forever. Canada is not going to wait. It wants it to get its energy to the market.
Well, okay, yes, but they got a lot. I mean, you're right, but they have a lot that can come north to south. Also, we need the Keystone for the North Dakota.
Yes, exactly.
That's another part of it. But, John, just to come back to Steve's point on the corporate tax, you give up the loopholes. I don't care about the loopholes. I don't care about the inversions. 20% corporate tax rate is just fat.
Inversion that's taking a corporation offshore because it's a better tax rate, right? So,
if you do that, you have to repatriate. There's about $2 trillion that's not being invested in America because it's offshore. Now, that's the problem. Obama's going to oppose that. He wants to tax the foreign profits that are repatriated, and he's wrong. And I think there's going to be a fist fight about this. And my point is, Republicans should put their best foot forward and sell it on the grounds that it would help workers and wage earners. They are the beneficiaries of a drop in the corporate tax. It is not a rich man's tax. It is a working man's
Does
tax.
that mean it creates jobs, Larry?
Yes, it's a job creator, but even putting that aside, when you raise the corporate tax, that comes out of salaries and benefits of the existing workforce. So even if you didn't create another new job, they would be better off if you went from 35% to 20% because companies can afford to spread that income around. One of the problems is that's not happening, and that's one of the reasons that incomes have been so poor.
So
the GOP has to sell this as a working man's tax cut.
Now, here's the big issue, John. All these things we're talking about, I think, are common sense to the vast majority of American voters.
Well, the people who voted last week, it's common sense. Yes,
sure.
yes. Not the two-thirds who didn't, maybe not.
Yeah, right. The big, well, that's Obama's line, that this wasn't a legitimate election because two-thirds of the voters didn't vote. I think those people probably would have voted against Obama's policies, too. But my point is, the real wild card here is whether Barack Obama is capable of pulling a Bill Clinton and moving to the center and getting things done.
No.
And, Larry, I got to tell you, in the last 7 days, I've heard nothing out of this president that suggests he's going to do that. I thought his speech last Wednesday, when he talked about two-thirds of the voters didn't vote, so this really wasn't a legitimate election, and maybe I'll sign some of this stuff if it's consistent with my values. And then he comes out of the gate with these two things I mentioned before the last break, this government regulation of the Internet, which is extremely dangerous, and unilaterally doing immigration reform. Larry, the Republicans cannot tolerate that. They've got to
put. He is no Bill Clinton. He is not going to move to the center. He is a left-wing ideologue, and he could care less because he's not running for anything anymore. My point, in agreement with you, is the Republicans have got to generate good pro-growth legislation, pass it, and put it on his desk. That's the important thing. I don't care if the deals are not struck. I don't think the GOP was necessarily elected to make bad deals. I just want them to put their best foot forward, put it on his desk. They should have so many bills, including Obamacare bills. His head will spin, and it's sure. Let him veto it, and then let Hillary Clinton give us her position on all these issues. Because you know what the exit polls show? People don't like her either.
Larry Kudlow, CNBC, and Kudlow Radio on the weekend. Steve Moore, the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation, looking forward to January 3rd, 2015, and when the 114th Congress meets to create jobs for America through private enterprise. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.